Hello, and welcome to part 5 of the Photoshop tutorial series. And today, we are going to be looking at character line tracing. So let's start by making a new canvas for us to work on. I'm going to go up here to File, New, and once again, we're going to be making an A3 canvas. So I'm going to switch these here to millimeters. Make sure that says pixels per inch. And so the width is 420 millimeters by 297 millimeters, and the resolution has to be 300 pixels per inch. All right, and go OK. Okay, so we now have our A3 canvas ready to work on. But before we go any further, we're just going to make sure we save the file. So I'm going to go up to File, Save As. I've called it Tutorial 5. Make sure it's a Photoshop PSD file. Click Save. Yep, that's all right. And as you can see, when I've created this new file, the actual tab of it is available here for you to click on. And if I click on it, it will go to that canvas. So now I'm going to show you the image that we're going to be tracing. If I go up here, there's a tab here that says snowboarder.png. Click on the tab, and then here is the image that we are going to be working on. But I want to take this into the main canvas that we just made before. So I'm going to go Control A, select all, and then Control C to copy. Then I'm going to go back to my Tutorial 5 PSD file, click on that tab, and then just go ahead and go Control V to paste, like so. Okay, so we want to make the image a little bit bigger so it's easier to work on. So I'm going to go ahead here to the layer that it's on, layer 1. I'll just rename that image. Cool. So I'll right click on that layer image and turn it into a smart object, which means it will scale the image without losing quality. So I'm going to go Control T for transform, and then Shift Alt, click the corner, and just enlarge the image a little bit here. All right, there we go. So before we start tracing this character, there is a couple of things that we need to do. Firstly, we're going to create a new layer. So I'm going to go down to the layers panel here on the right, down to the very bottom, click the new layer button, like that, and it should appear on top of the image layer. If it's not, make sure you put this new layer here above the image layer. I'm going to call the new layer Trace, okay, like that. So now I'm going to go to the left-hand side and pick here the brush tool, like that. And now watch what happens. The benefits of having the trace layer different from the image layer is that I can actually draw on top of the image layer like this, but not destroy the image itself. For example, if I turn the trace layer off and turn off the brush markings, you're left with the image completely intact. Or I can turn the trace layer back on here, like that. Go to the eraser tool here on the left-hand side, pick eraser tool, and then I can actually go ahead now and just quickly erase the brush markings, like so. But anyway, I'll just go ahead now and just do a nice clean slate. Go Control A, select all, and then backspace to delete. And we'll start with a fresh layer. So I'm just going to quickly show you how the brush tool actually works. Back to the left-hand side. Here we go, the brush tool. Now, you get this little circle here, and that basically shows you how big the brush is. Now, there's a really cool tip. What you can do is that if you look at your keyboard, just above the Enter key are two square brackets. Now, if I click the right one, it actually enlarges the brush, like so. And if I press the left one repeatedly, it will make it a lot smaller, like that. So let's see how the brush tool looks at different sizes. So I'm going to go ahead now and increase the size of the brush by clicking on the right square bracket on the keyboard, like that. And here we go. We get a big fat brush mark here. I'll go Control Z to undo. And then if I click on the left-hand square bracket key, make the brush smaller, you get a very, very thin brush, like that. And once again, Control Z to undo. So before we move on, there is one last thing I want to show you about brushes. So make sure that you've got the brush here in the left-hand side selected. And if you go up here, you'll probably see like a little dot with a number underneath it. It's in the top left-hand corner. Now if I click on that, it'll give you a whole bunch of options to what kind of brushes or brush tips that you can use. But the two main things I want to focus on are size and hardness. So if I have the size, I'll put it up to about halfway, maybe 100 pixels, and the hardness set to 100%. Actually, I'll make the size a bit bigger. There we go, 442 pixels. Okay, so I've got the hardness turned up to 100%, so watch what happens. I'm going to draw, as you can see, the actual brush stroke is quite hard, hence hardness. But if I go ahead now, wait, I'll just go undo, Control Z. If I go back to that little panel and change the hardness down to something like, 10%, now if I brush again on the canvas, you can see how it does a very soft line, like so, and Control Z to undo. So that is brush hardness. Now let's move on to the next bit. So before we start tracing, we need to see the actual tracing line. So what I'm going to do is go to the image layer here. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to turn the opacity of that layer down, let's say to about 40%. Now this means that when I actually start tracing on top of this image, it will be more easier to see the trace marks. So I'm going to go here and make sure I have trace clicked, like that. Now if I just turn my brush down a little bit smaller, now you see if I draw on top of the image layer, it is very easy to identify the brush marks. Might just quickly turn that hardness back up to 100%, and there you go. And I'll just go Control Z to undo, like that. Okay, so let's start tracing. So the first technique I want to show you when you are tracing an image is to move in really close into the image itself. So I'm going to go ahead now and go Control plus and move right in. And also use the space bar, and the hand will show up, which means if I click and drag, I can move the canvas around. So I want to move in really close into the image, like there. Okay. Now at the moment my brush is a little bit too fat, so I'm going to turn it down just a little bit, like so. And now we can start tracing this image. Okay, so we're going to start by making a silhouette of this image. And just remember, it has to be a closed loop, so no gaps between the lines. It must be one continuous line around the subject. You don't have to draw it all at once, but you just need to make sure that all the lines are connected as you draw around the image. Now, one quick technique I need to show you. It's very difficult to draw straight lines with a mouse or even with a tablet. For example, if I try to draw a straight line here, you can tell that it's pretty difficult to keep it straight. So a really cool technique, what you can do is just click a dot onto the canvas, like that. And then if I want to draw a straight line, I click on where the line should end. But I'd hold down Shift and then click, and it creates a straight line. So once again, I click a dot on the canvas, find the other spot where it ends, Shift, click, and you draw a straight line, like so. There we go. Okay, let's trace. Let's move in really close. There we go. Make sure trace is selected. That's very important. Make sure trace is selected here in the layer panel. Okay, so we've traced the character. It is a closed loop. Now we want to go ahead and cut out the image of the snowboarder and put it onto a separate layer so we can start adding some really cool effects like filters to it. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and start selecting the outside of this trace. So there's a couple of things we need to make sure before we start selecting outside the trace. Is making sure that trace here in the layers is selected and that we have our magic wand tool on the left here ready to go. And now we can start selecting the outside parts of this trace. And just make sure as well that contiguous here at the top is ticked as well. So here I go. I'm going to click on the outside of the trace like that. And then there's 3 more kind of outside parts here between the legs. I'm going to shift and click, select those. Between the wrist and the boot, shift click on that. And the armpit here as well, shift click there as well. Okay, so I've now got the whole outside of the image selected. But basically we want to cut out the image of the snowboarder. So I'm going to go ahead now and go Control Shift I. That will inverse the selection. Control Shift I. Now we now have the inverse selection. So now the whole snowboard image here has been selected. Now I'm going to go ahead and click here now on the image layer because that's the image that we want to cut out. And now I'm just going to go ahead now and go Control C for copy and then Control V for paste. There we go. And now if I turn off all the layers except the new one, we now have a cutout copy of that snowboard image. Okay, so now we're ready to add some really cool effects to this image. I'm going to go ahead now and just activate the background so it's easy to see. And also I'm going to activate the trace layer as well to show off that really cool line art around the image. And I'm just going to rename that layer as well that I've just cut out. I'm going to call it cutout, like so. Okay, and now we're ready to start adding some effects to this image. Okay, so I'm going to quickly just make a duplicate of the cutout layer. I'm going to click on the layer here and drag it down to the button, the new layer button. There we go, it's created a copy of that layer. The reason why I'm doing this is because if I make a mistake, then I have something to fall back on. So that's been duplicated. I'm going to turn that duplicate layer off and just show the actual cutout image itself. I've got that selected as well. Alright, so let's add the filters. So I'm going to go up here to Filter, and the third one down, Filter Gallery. I'm going to select that. Now if you take a look, you get this filter window, and it's got all of these options for creating effects, or special effects, with your image. Don't let it intimidate you. There's some really cool stuff in here that you can use. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use an old favorite here, which is called the cutout filter. And as you can see here, what kind of effect it has on the image. It's a pretty cool rendering. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK and confirm that. So there we go. I've got this really cool stylized version of the snowboarder now. Okay, so let's quickly add a gradient map filter onto this. I'm just going to go ahead now and pick two colors. I'm going to pick like a blue and let's say a green, about there. I'm going to go ahead now to Image, Adjustments, Gradient Map. Let's see what happens to the image. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. I'll stick to that. So I've got this processed image here that is ready to use. So I'm going to go ahead now and just create a really quick and simple sticker design based on this imagery. So now I want to actually combine the cutout layer with the trace layer. Before I do that, I'm going to click on Trace, drag it down to the New Layer button to create a duplicate. Right, so now I have a copy, just in case. I'm going to turn that off. And now I want to merge Trace and Cutout together. So I'm going to move Cutout to just below Trace. I'm going to click on Trace. And now I'm going to hit Control E. Now what Control E will do is it will take the layer you've selected and collapse it with the one below. So Control E. Okay, and now the two layers have now collapsed into one. So I now have this image here ready to go. So what I'm going to do is create a really quick and simple sticker design that utilizes this image here. Okay, so I'm going to create a new layer below Cutout, and I'm going to call this Circle. I'm going to go to the marquee tool here, make sure elliptical marquee tool is selected. I'm going to draw a quick circle, Shift Alt, and drag, like that. I'm going to go to Edit, Fill. I'm going to use the background color here, go OK. Should fill with green, there you go. So next I want to place the image of the cutout inside the circle itself. And this is quite straightforward to do. I'm going to go over to my layers. I'm going to hold down the Control key and click on the image in that layer, and it should select that layer. There we go. The circle has been selected. But now I want to use this shape to act as the border around the cutout. So I'm going to go to the cutout layer, like so. And then I'm going to go down here and click the mask button. It's the third one from the left. It looks like a really simplified rectangle and a circle inside. Click on that button there. And now it's made a mask, a layer mask. So how does this layer mask work? Well, watch this. If I actually click or on the lock here, the link, and then I click on the image layer, like so. Now watch what happens when I move the cutout around. It looks like it's been placed inside the circle shape. So it's a pretty cool technique. So I might just place it over here like this. There we go. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and actually integrate a logo into this design. So I've actually got a image here ready to go. This is the Burton Snowboards logo here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select it, copy and paste it into the main snowboard image. So I'm going to go ahead now and get the Magic Wand tool. Yep, that's been selected, Magic Wand tool. And now I'm going to click on the black area of the logo to select the logo itself. But this time I'm going to have contiguous here unselected, which means that if I pick one area with a certain color, it will pick all of the same color in the rest of the image. So watch what happens if I click on this black area here. It's actually gone ahead and selected all the other blacks in the image itself. So I'm going to go ahead now and go Control C to copy. I'm going to move back to my main snowboard image, and then I'm going to go Control V to paste. And there you go, I've got my logo. So I have my logo here now. I'm going to go ahead and actually make that a smart layer. Sorry, a smart object. I'm just going to name that layer logo, like so. I'm going to transform it, make it a little bit bigger. Okay, like that. And then I want to go ahead now. I'd actually prefer it to be white instead of black. So I'm going to go ahead now and turn this back into a rasterized layer. Rasterized layer. Like so. I'm going to control and click on the layer image in the layers panel over here, like that. That will select the logo itself. And then I'm going to go ahead and go Edit, Fill, and select white. Like that. Now if I deselect, there we go. I got a really nice punchy version of the Burton logo. Alright, so now lastly what I might do is click on the snowboarder image and go Control I to invert. And there we go, that looks much better I reckon. And that is pretty much it. So now we have integrated a cutout line art imagery with a popular brand to create a very simple design. Well, that's it for me. Thanks very much. I shall see you guys in the next video. See ya.